Recently, Mercedes has faced challenges with their W14B, the fancy name they give to their car. Instead of dominating, we're seeing a silver arrow that's only slightly edging past its rivals for the second position, not counting Red Bull's speedy car. But hold on, there's still plenty of motivation for them to keep pushing this season, even though Toto Wolff, the big boss, mentioned they're shifting focus to the 2024 car. There's a big glaring reason for their hustle, and a shadowy threat lurks around Mercedes' 2023 campaign. It looks like they realize that finishing in second or fourth place makes a big difference. That's why they're still jazzing up the W14 with upgrades for the rest of the season. After being all in on their super cool zero pod idea for a while, Mercedes finally gave it the boot and jumped on the bandwagon of a hot new trend called the downwash solution. Why the switcheroo? Well, it turns out Red Bull hit the jackpot with their downwash thing, and folks started believing that if Mercedes followed suit, they'd zoom ahead with instant improvements. So Mercedes had these super high hopes when they switched things up, but the reality was a bit of a plot twist. Instead of a turbo boost in performance, their brave move to tinker with the side pods left them with a coin toss solution. No gains at best, and at worst, it slowed them down on the track. Yikes! Mercedes had this funky zero pod idea that folks have been skeptical about since 2022. But guess what? It had some cool perks for making the car go zoom zoom. The plan was simple yet genius. By shaking up the car's insides and moving those side crash bars around, they managed to shrink the side pods. And that wasn't just about being aerodynamic. It was like turning the car's bodywork into magic wings that could create extra grip on the road. Now here comes the interesting part. When they put the zero pod and the downwash designs in a race, the zero pod was a bit quicker, by just over 0.1 seconds. So why would they ditch this tiny speed boost and go for what seemed like a step back? But believe it or not, Mercedes had their secret playbook for making this choice. When Mercedes was having a tough time keeping up with the speedy Red Bull RB19 and even trailing behind Aston Martin, they knew they had to settle the score about those side pods. Mercedes thought their idea was cooler, with extra grip from the downforce, but doubts about its impact on the rest of the car were like pesky flies that wouldn't go away. Those pesky doubts were a blessing in disguise. By letting go of the coolness of the zero pods, Mercedes had a ticket to a ride filled with even bigger improvements as they worked on the car. It was like they traded in a shiny toy for a treasure map, guiding them to new ways of being super speedy. Now here's the juicy part. The downwash solution was like a seed that had room to grow. Even though it started as a bit of a slowdown, it turned into something awesome once the smart folks on the team figured out how to make it even better. And guess what? Their hard work is already paying off. They hit a little bump in the road during the Monaco Grand Prix, but then they whipped out their new side pod idea in Belgium, which worked like a charm. More cool stuff is on the way, especially when winter comes around. Mercedes is aiming to make a big, bold leap. Mike Elliott, the chief technical director at Mercedes, put it this way, quote, "First version, not too much magic, but we're like superheroes, always getting better. This version, a bit more magic, and just wait till you see the next one. We're cooking up some serious speed for the winter," end quote. When the big shots at Mercedes decided to roll with the Zeroed at the beginning of this year, Mike Elliott, the technical guru, had his eyes on the design. He spilled the beans on why they didn't hop onto the downwash train last winter. It was pretty straightforward. That design didn't serve up any extra speed. Here's the scoop in his own words, quote, "We played around with different bodywork ideas during the winter, but none of them brought us a sweet upgrade. But don't worry, they didn't just copy the other kids' homework. Nope, what they did was a bit like remixing their own thing to make it spicier. This way, they didn't take the same performance hit as before. The plan? Let it evolve over time and hopefully end up in a cooler spot. But that's not all. This whole side pod debate has stirred up some serious introspection at Mercedes. They're questioning themselves and their game plan, which might be like finding a treasure map just in time for winter. The goal? Cook up a winning car for the races and zoom ahead with the W15. Yet there are many reasons why Mercedes shouldn't give up on trying to do their best this season. And these reasons add up to around 10 to 15 million in total. Mercedes is in a close competition with Ferrari, Aston Martin, and recently McLaren to see which team is the second fastest in Formula One. 10 races are still left, and they're working hard to figure out their final position. Currently, the Silver Arrows are in second place with 247 points. They are ahead of Aston Martin by 51 points and Ferrari by 5 extra points. But because each team's speed changes from one race to the next, they can't relax and start thinking about 2024. It might be tempting to stop improving the W14 car and focus on making the W15 better for the next year like Red Bull is doing. But the idea of securing a second place is too important to give up on. The viewpoint was shared by Richard Bradley, who won the Le Mans race in 2015. He talked about it on the OTGP podcast. He pointed out a big difference in the prize money for the team that comes in second place compared to the one in fourth place. This matters even for a team like Mercedes, which is careful about spending due to the budget cap. Bradley said, quote, "For Mercedes, there are many advantages because they're in a serious competition for those points and positions in the Constructors' Championship. Getting first place for the Drivers' Championship and Constructors' Championship is almost certain for them. So Red Bull must start focusing more on the next year because they're doing really well right now. But for Mercedes, there's a good chance they could end up in second place, but there's also a chance they could come in fourth. Just to give you an idea, I don't know the exact numbers because they change every year. It's probably a difference of about $10 to $15 million in prize money. That's a lot of money. So Mercedes can benefit by continuing to make their cars better this year. But for Red Bull, it doesn't make much sense, honestly. Of course, there's also pride and extra money for doing well in the Constructors' Championship. But one has to wonder if the extra effort and money spent on aiming for second place this year will affect their chances of doing even better next year. These are tough decisions the team has to make, and whether they will lead to success in the long term is another question. But that money can be used for development, and Mercedes won't give up. Especially after McLaren showed rapid improvement in just a few races. Now everyone sees them as a serious competitor for the top position. That's why, even though Wolff mentioned that most of the planned upgrades for 2023 had stopped after a strong effort in the middle of the season when Mercedes was trying out a new concept, there are still a few changes left for the W14 car. George Russell mentioned they have some small bits in mind for the year's second half. The Chief Technical Officer, Mike Elliott, discussed modifications to the side pods tested in Belgium after being introduced in Monaco. He explained that Mercedes hasn't completely changed their methods or approaches like other teams, but they've adjusted what they already had. Their design and performance are evolving slowly over time, not suddenly. While the initial changes didn't bring huge improvements, Mercedes sees this as a chance to explore different options. Elliott emphasized their continuous focus on improving and expects more developments in the upcoming versions, especially during the winter. Mercedes is in a strong position to finish as the second-best team this year. While surprises can happen in Formula One, only Red Bull and Mercedes have won anything in the last 14 seasons of the turbo hybrid era. If you were to guess which team might challenge Red Bull next season, Mercedes would be a likely choice for fans. They say they're well prepared for the winter, but they said the same thing last year. So the saying, "Fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me," might apply again this season. Still, aiming for second place in the constructors' standings would be a smart move for Mercedes, especially with McLaren in the mix, assuming Ferrari and Aston Martin aren't as reliable. Given the choice, do you believe Mercedes should continue gradually improving their current car for second place? Or should they shift their focus entirely towards next year's car? Let us know in the comments below.